Hi, folks, just to let a few people load in and we'll get rolling. This is a just setting the tone. I'll say it again, but this is a very casual opportunity, sort of open house to give you some information. You can stay off camera, but we're also making it so that you could go off mute, go on camera, and ask some questions of us as we get further along here. So I imagine many of you eating your lunch, so eat away. Start maybe in just about 30 seconds, and I'm sure some more people will pile in. They're used to coming in late because we usually have a big front end, which we don't have this time. Okay, I'm going to get started. And just for those of you who didn't hear me say it first time, this is a very casual, informal information session to give you some more information about the upcoming Housing Opportunity Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, part of the one of the sort of the annual milestone events of the Twillinger Center, who I'll introduce in a second. Some of you will know me, some of you won't, but I'm ULI, Richard Joy, the Executive Director for ULI Toronto. And I attended this conference last year with a number of people from Toronto, probably about 10 or 12 of us went down. And that was in Austin, Texas, that last year. I think we learned a lot. I think one of the things that I would say is that when it comes to innovation and models and approaches, whether they're finance, whether they're design, public policy, public finance, this is not something I think we in Canada do exceptionally well, and I think that's been exposed in recent years as we've been looking at how do we solve for housing affordability in our country. Not to say that America's got it licked; they don't, as we'll find out, as you probably already know. But the kind of innovations that are happening in the U.S., I think, offer us opportunities to learn and maybe import some thinking into our market. And that's kind of, I think, the key idea of why this Housing Opportunity Conference might be of interest to some of you. So I'm going to, if you could maybe just go to the next slide. I'm going to now introduce two of my colleagues at headquarters in Washington, who are representatives of the Twillinger Center, who are going to introduce the Twillinger Center, but then more importantly, or to the point of this meeting, give you some detail about what to expect were you to attend the Atlanta conference. And I'm probably going to go down myself. I haven't 100% committed, but we do have another event in Toronto that week, which is a bit of a conflict for me. But I think I'm going to try to go down because I'm very sure from what I'm hearing that not only is this a great conference wherever it happens to be, but Atlanta is an interesting city for these models of different models and ideas that I think there's a lot of learning to happen. And I want to be part of that. So I'm going to introduce Sarah Joyce, who's the associate at the Twillinger Center, and Fabiola. Oops, someone just popped in. You know what, Fabiola? I don't know how many times I've pronounced your last name, but I don't think it's very many. So you're gonna help me out before I butcher it. You're gonna help me. But we've done a lot of work with Fabiola, despite my not being able to pronounce her last name, who's a great colleague and knows Toronto well from having helped us deliver a technical advisory panel last year. So maybe Fabiola and Sarah. Fabiola, start with the pronunciation of your last name. I apologize.
It's okay. Fabiola Yorkison.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, keeping it casual. They're going to take the floor, and I think we can take out the slides off now, and they're going to share their slides. And then we're going to have some room, just people can just ask questions. You can do it in the chat, of course, as well, if you prefer. But this is just information flow here, starting with you, Fabiola.
Thank you. Let me put myself in presentation mode. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, we have enjoyed our collaboration. As Richard mentioned, I am the director for technical assistance at the center. But we're a small team. So, of course, the Housing Opportunity Conference, being one of our most important events, is a collaborative engagement for all our teams. So we're all well-versed in what we do. So I wanted to first start with giving you an overview of what we do at the center. The Terwilliger Center was established in 2007 with a generous donation by Ron Terwilliger. He is former ULI chairman of the board and a longtime member. He's still with us. He's in his 80s and very involved in our center. Broadly, our mission is to ensure that everybody has a home that meets their needs at the price that they can afford. And we do this catalyzing the production of the availability of housing, in a full spectrum kind of options of housing. How do we do this? Through three general kind of buckets. Our engagement is really important. That includes our advisory services and technical assistance panels, our roundtables, and events that try to bring solutions to this housing challenge that we all have. I mean, globally, but specifically in the United States. We bring awareness through our events and member networking, learning sessions, and shared of our publications. And through education, both through case studies, awards, urban land articles, and our flagship publication, which is the Home Attainability Index. More granularly, our initiative and activities, we do research. As I mentioned, our Home Attainability Index is a data-rich resource for understanding local housing needs. And specifically, who are we trying to solve for? And so the Home Attainability Index makes it very clear that we're that all those professions that make places worth living and that we love being there, which is the workforce, our firefighters, our nurses, our teachers, all need attainable places to live. Our housing awards, where we recognize innovative developments and policies that have a positive impact in housing supply. We also do technical assistance. I am the director of that program, and we work to provide grant and staff support in collaboration with our local district councils. The reason we're here, our Housing Opportunity Conference, which is a smaller conference that our spring and fall meeting. If you have attended any of those, this is a much more intimate setting. It's around 600 people, and it really is housing focused. And lastly, our Homeless to House initiative that is trying to explore real estate solutions to this growing humanitarian and economic crisis impacting communities everywhere. I put this slide here because we thought it was really important for you to understand what the Terwilliger Center does. We partner directly with district councils. You could see Toronto is there. We have had an award winner, and we did a TAP this past fiscal year. It was really enjoyable to work with you locally, and we hope to continue our work with Toronto in the future. But this gives you at a glance of the sizes of our district councils and who have we worked with before. We bring technical assistance, we bring advisor service panels, we support district councils also in the regional events and summits. We partner with them for the Housing Opportunity Conference in Atlanta in this case. We do index engagements, and obviously different localities apply for our awards. And this slide is meant for you to understand kind of our philosophy. We think about all the things we do as engines that kind of help move our mission forward. So our engagements really impact, we bring those winners and to create case studies, and we feature them in webinars and engagements. Our technical assistance helps our engagement with local district councils and our local members, and all of them, kind of help our national engagements at different levels. And then just to kind of help you illustrate how we see our impact in a more granular example, using Boise as an example. So in 2021, one of their local townhouse development was selected as a Kemp Award. Then in 2022, which is my first technical assistance as part of ULI, we used the Home Attainability Index to really showcase very quickly how Boise was becoming very expensive for the workforce, to the point that the mayor actually publicly acknowledged and thanked the panel for our recommendations. All our recommendations for that panel have been implemented, which is kind of amazing, and really impacted their zoning rewrite that was finalized in June of 2023. We have spotlighted the process and what they have done, given their challenging affordability. For you, in the Canadian context, Boise it's a small community that is incredible, beautiful, surrounded by beautiful mountains. Very, has a lot of hikes, skiing, and historically, it's a small city. But during the pandemic, because we could all work remotely, it really faced, I think, it almost doubled its population. And obviously, it lost really its affordability. And so I think their housing market has increased like 47%. They're a very interesting example of how important it is to protect affordability locally. And then, we have continued to support them by featuring what they have done through our Building the Futures report, which I'll cover in the next slide, and also leveraging our events grants to be able for them to establish a housing month, which the first one was in April of 2024. So in the past, our Larson Awards will try to showcase what was happening locally to really accelerate the production of housing and what policies were doing that. But it was really challenging because, as you can imagine, all the local jurisdictions in the United States, I would assume that it will be similar in Canada, are really trying to, create policies that will accelerate housing production. But how do we award that without knowing if that is going to be really going to impact the needle, right? And move the needle in the direction that we wanted it. And so what we decided is to move a little bit away from giving an award and creating more of a policy report that will have more state and local housing policies that will highlight that. And I just saw Sarah putting that in the chat for you to be able to access that report. And so the Shaw Forum, which is a forum that goes around different centers here at HQ, its focus was that topic. And so, that allowed us to showcase different state and local policies that were affecting the production of housing. And finally, it's going to become a policy forum that we're going to do on an annual basis. And our next in-person forum will be in February 2024 in our conference in person, which is going to be exciting. And so now I'm going to pass it to Sarah for her to kind of go over the housing conference, and then we can open it for questions.
Cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the conference. As you know, the 2025 conference is in Atlanta. And on the left here, you can kind of see our past locations. Last year in Austin was our biggest conference. We had over 550 attendees. It was really successful and really a good opportunity to partner with the district council. And in previous years, it's been in Phoenix. We had a couple years of virtual, and before that in Miami, Florida, and in Orange County, California. So sort of in each location, we end up discussing a lot of local issues, but a lot of national issues as well. So it's a really mixed as you'll see on the next slide, it's really mixed content that applies to local and national audiences. So we can go to the next slide. So this year, we have 3 general sessions. The first one, which is, this is sort of the opening general session for every housing conference, is the state of U.S. housing markets. And that features Ken Rosen and Adam Ducker of RCLCO and Courtney English with the City of Atlanta. And so the 3 of them will kind of talk about state of U.S. housing markets.
Could you just say, sorry, Ken and Adam, we're not familiar with some of the organizations as Canadians, so maybe just more clearly who they are.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Ken is an economist, and he talks about the economics of the housing market and what's going on. And RCLCO is a real estate consulting firm. And so the 2 of them sort of just have like a presentation about how it's going and an outlook for 2025. And Adam, we partner with RCLCO and Adam to create our home attainability index. So Adam will be talking about the 2025 iteration and sort of any new themes that are coming up this year. And Courtney English works with the City of Atlanta and the Mayor of Atlanta, and will be giving some remarks with them. The second general session is called the Atlanta Model, and this features 3 giants of the Atlanta housing scene, and they're just going to really talk about what makes Atlanta different and what makes Atlanta special, and sort of everything that Atlanta has been through, and how they're working on creating better housing and more affordable housing and all that. And then our last general session is a fireside chat with Dr. Raphael Bostic, who is the president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and Dennis Shea, who is executive director at the other Terwilliger Center at the Bipartisan Policy Center. So that's going to be a really broad overview of sort of big federal level things that are happening in the housing market, and just sort of what these 2 people who have their hands in a lot of different places have to say. So those are our big general sessions. We can go to the next slide.
Yeah, and the only thing I will also mention here is that the idea of this 3 sessions is really to first, have different apertures. So the reason we chose, something local for a general session is Atlanta is a very interesting jurisdiction. They may not feel it themselves, but us at the national level, they're very innovative in how they're addressing our housing crisis. So I think that session specifically is going to be kind of amazing. And the ability to have the Bipartisan Policy Center really, and Dennis Shea, as with this conversation with Dr. Raphael Bostic, is also really important because, as you may know, there are federal policies that really affect the local level. And so we always try to think about those apertures, like how do we have state of U.S. housing kind of is very upper level, and then we go deep, and then we come back up to think about like how all those things happen in considering more kind of policies and what things will be able to pass in the next administration and our new political landscape. So,
yeah, that is a really good point. And so, sort of in prior years, we have always been kind of like a focus on affordable housing, but we think it's really important to bring together like all sectors of the housing industry. And so this year we are having tracks for the first time. So in our concurrent sessions, we're having a market rate track, an affordable housing track, an innovation track, and a finance track. And so sort of hoping to bring this to as many people as possible, and for it to really be a full spectrum. Like the Terwilliger Center cares about creating a full spectrum of housing options, which obviously includes both affordable and market rate. So we're really excited about this new sort of system. And so our market rate track will feature a panel on single family rental, new product types on the market, whether that be missing middle or office to residential, or modular, some high growth suburbs and sort of what that means. Our affordable housing track will feature a panel from our Homeless to Housed initiative, kind of focused on deeply affordable housing and the financing behind that. One on closing the racial homeownership gap, and another one on unlocking housing on faith-based land. Our innovation track talks about innovative policies that are kind of catalyzing new production, one on prop tech and AI, and one on new construction technologies that might have an impact on the market. And then our finance track will have one on capital markets, one on impact investing, and sort of the double bottom line for corporations, how they can do good and meet the returns of their investors, and one on development and investment by African American women, because that is really big in Atlanta, and they have a lot of great examples to showcase. So those are our concurrent sessions.
Yeah, and the only thing I will add also is that we do this in partnership. So most of the sessions will have some locals from Atlanta, right? As I mentioned, they have a very strong housing market, and in doing really innovative things. One of our innovation panels is going to be curated by Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is doing a lot of things in the space. We even may have, some interesting visitors that are not sentient beings. So I think that's going to be really interesting. So that just to say that all of these panels have national representation and local representation. And the way we achieve this is we partner with ULI Atlanta to create a committee. And that committee that is made of their local leadership helps us kind of bring the best of those practitioners at the local level. And obviously us as a national center have the viewpoint of who to include at the national level. So it's a really interesting mix of how each of those tracks are going to address the conversation both locally and nationally.
Yeah, so it's really important that we bring something to the local audience, because obviously we get more local attendees than national attendees, but that there's really good content for everyone who attends. And in terms of good content, no housing conference would be complete without our tours. So we're offering 4 tours, and these are just in different parts of Atlanta and focus on different things. One of them being the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic District Tour. So a lot of the places where he lived and that are important to his legacy. New for the first time, we're doing a bike tour of the Atlanta Beltline West Side Trail. The Beltline is sort of this big bike and walking and multi-use trail that is being built all around Atlanta in different segments. So we'll be going on the west side of it. We're going on a tour of Trilith, which is a really big master plan community and sort of the new home of US Soccer and many movie studios, and has kind of a sustainable luxury lens to it. So we'll be doing that. And then we'll be doing a tour of downtown Atlanta mega tour, which has a lot of redevelopments, some office to residential, some deeply affordable housing, kind of a smorgasbord of all that downtown Atlanta's new redevelopments have to offer.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the Atlanta Beltline, the Atlanta Beltline was created as a capstone from an urban planner that was local to Atlanta, and it took advantage of an old railway that was around and different land that was around kind of the beltway in the United States. Most cities have beltways around them. And so it has helped kind of the city to be an organizing principle, and it has allowed for a lot of very intentional planning. And so it's going to be a dynamite tour. I think that we're very excited about it. First being the first bike tour that is, we can do with liability stuff because it's only for bikes, right? And it's also an amazing aspect of how to organize, kind of being that footprint that helps the city organize itself. So it's very unique to Atlanta.
Cool. So then sort of just to wrap up, here's some logistics and who attends our conference. So as you know, it's Tuesday, February 25th to Wednesday, February 26th. The conference begins at noon on Tuesday and ends at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. If you do end up coming, the tours are from 1:30 to 5, and then we have a closing reception Wednesday night. It's at the Hilton Atlanta in downtown Atlanta. Registration is open until were filled. I don't know if in ULI Toronto it's the same case, but at least in ULI in the States, we were very late registration crowd. So, but if you want to stay at the hotel, that block does close February 10th. And I'll put the registration info in the chat. And then in terms of who attends this conference, sort of like I said, there is a lot of local presence. Last year, 2 out of 5 of our attendees were from Texas. As Richard said, we had a big delegation from Canada, about 15 attendees. In terms of private versus public sector, it's pretty evenly split. We had a lot of public sector people, a lot of private sector people. And then a lot of the people who came have professions, are architects and designers, developers, and urban planners. But we get a wide variety of people in different professions that attend. So that's kind of the demographics and any logistical information. And I think we can go to the next slide. And yeah, so if you all have any questions or any questions about the Terwilliger Center, any questions about the conference, Fabiola and I are very happy to answer.
Yeah, and I'm just now seeing this chat.
And there's one question in the chat. I think you kind of answered it though, Sarah. Maybe you could take the screen off, and I'm not sure people necessarily want to go on camera, but you can. Maybe Mark, why don't you ask your questions? I think there are 2 of them. And just go on camera if you're able to do that. And I'd love to have any other questions. And if there's not too many questions, we'll wrap early. Go ahead, Mark.
All right. The horns sticking out of my head are purely coincidental based on where I'm standing here today.
Yeah, I don't think so, but
just due to, I wasn't expecting to turn my camera on, and I'm clearly going to need to find a different angle in future. Nobody screenshot this, or if you do, you can send it to some urban designers. So obviously, I've done a lot of work with the Terwilliger Center over the last 5 or 6 years. Certainly, we're hearing a challenge, not just from your.
Who are you, Mark? Not everybody knows you.
Oh, sorry. I'm Mark Richardson from Rich Analytics. I am a volunteer with an organization called Housing Now TO that tracks affordable housing projects in the city of Toronto. And if you're watching CBC News tonight, you'll be hearing us interviewed about a NIMBY opposition to a long-term care home expansion in Yorkville and why we shouldn't listen to the cranky neighbors, no matter how rich they are. So we're seeing some challenges, not just in ULI stuff, but in other organizations, particularly for government-funded agencies and not-for-profits, that we might get a blanket ruling that we have to limit our travel into the US, given the border challenges and also the dollar challenges we're expecting. So, what are the opportunities in 2026 or 2027 to bring your conference to Toronto or to Vancouver or to Montreal or to one of the places where we are doing some fairly innovative stuff with affordable housing? And then the other question would be just for this year's registration, you said you had 15 Canadians already last year. Do you know what your registration of Canadian attendees is like already for your event in Atlanta, which is about a month away?
Yeah, I don't have an exact list of Canadians right now. My computer's being really slow, but I'm trying to open the registration list. So as soon as I have it, I will put it in the chat.
Yeah, our Wi-Fi varies very significantly depending where you are in the office. So right now here, we are probably using our bandwidth for the call. As far as just number of registrations, I think we already are at 250, right? And so normally we get, again, 500, 600 people. It's very sad to hear that there may be some travel restrictions. I am really sorry to hear that.
And those restrictions can be worked around if you were doing your event in a future year, like in Detroit or Buffalo or Seattle or somewhere where we can fly to Vancouver, fly to Windsor, drive down from Toronto and just sneak across the border.
Yeah.
It's when we have to get like government approvals to pay for flights to a US conference.
Okay,
Yeah, I
point,
see
point
that.
taken.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I mean, we have to work within the constraints, but as far as bringing the conference to Canada, I think that we have a little model that we have learned, so we're happy to collaborate with you. It will be something we can talk. As I mentioned, Ron Terwilliger is still alive, and
Yeah.
so he's very influential in where we actually take our conference. But I don't see why we cannot have, a housing conference in Canada. You're large enough to be able to think about this. I know you already have a housing week. It's kind of a little different
Yeah.
because it's kind of events. But this is a very deep dive, right? So it's just a matter of continuing the conversation and figuring out how we can do that. We're happy to lend our expertise to that process. We're always very thankful to Mark. He has been our jury pool for now a couple of years. And that's another way to engage with the center. I didn't cover this because, this was not the subject of our talk today, our presentation, but obviously we're happy to engage with any local members that want to engage with the center, and bring your expertise to bear. And as I mentioned, we have already an award from Canada. And so,
nominations should close in
Yeah.
February or March, right? For this
Correct.
year's nominations? Yeah. Okay.
yes, yeah, so we extended our application by February 1st.
February 1st,
Yes,
yeah.
for this year. So, so there's no reason why we couldn't have something like this in Canada.
You can host it in Niagara Falls. We just won't say which one.
Yes,
That'll be the magic trick.
Well, my challenge to us Canadians, is to mock up what we think might a great program look like, because I really do believe that we're at a deficit of best practices, certainly modern best practices in the affordable housing models in our country, and I'm sure we could fill a program, but I think things like the approaches that we would be treated to in Atlanta are far more plentiful in the U.S. jurisdictions, and more for us to take back to our country. And that's not all. Often I think it's the other way around, frankly. But in this particular lens, I'm not so sure. And for another day. Any other
Yep,
questions?
thank you.
Any other questions around the horn here that people want us to address that might have you sitting on the fence as to whether you might want to attend this, or what have you? Logistics, editorial questions, anything? Okay. Not seeing. At least I don't think I've seen any. I'm looking at the chat.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not unexpected to have
So-
just more information absorbed. I think I just saw someone put something in the chat.
Oh, it was me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
there you go. Yes, one lonely Canadian attendee. Well, I'll be maybe joining that one lonely. And I think Marega from Wood Green is telling me he's probably good to go. And maybe some others who've now taken in this call might cross the line and to wanting to attend as well. But I definitely think that Atlanta is worth us looking at.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more, Richard. And I also think that the tracks that we have developed may be a good footprint to what the work you're doing right now as an organizing principle. There are ways to discuss affordability in a particular way, financing, I think the impact funds are really an interesting kind of innovation that is happening locally to kind of help that capital stack pencil out. And so not only Atlanta is an amazing market to do that, but also something that could be replicated elsewhere. So yeah, we are here for any additional questions, and we look forward to meeting you in person for those of you that want to attend our conference.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Fabiola. That's really great of you to do this. And thank you for all of you for just kicking the tires and getting a little more detail. And hopefully a few of you will come. I think, as I said, repeating myself, but I think there's a lot that we can bring back to our country with respect to these models. My staff has conveniently put up the upcoming events. We're always marketing our upcoming events, of course. Some good ones though, and a free webinar on the 29th around green building standards in Toronto, what to expect. We've got our next, our member only series continues with a really, really interesting Michael Lindsay, the interim CEO of Metrolinx, on February the 11th. Ski Day, you don't want to miss. It's actually about 80 people, probably over 100 this year. A lot of fun. So hopefully you'll check that out. And of course, our Winter Social, all of this happening inside of just like 3-4 weeks. Amazing. And more after that. So always busy at ULI Toronto. And with that, I will also sign off and say thank you to you all and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.